You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Buck has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cashflow Podcast. Now, here's Kevin Buck.
Hey guys, Kevin Buck here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cashflow Podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is real estate investment expert, Brian Hamrick. Now, Brian is the owner of Hamrick Investment Group, which controls over $32 million in assets, including multifamily and apartments, self-storage, office, and performing and non-performing notes. Brian currently asset manages 370 apartment units in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and successfully transitioned from his W-2 job to full-time real estate investing in 2014. In addition to his real estate endeavors, Brian also hosts a popular real estate investing podcast, which can be found on iTunes and all other listening platforms. You'll learn how Brian got his start in the movie industry prior to taking the leap of faith into the real estate investment world. You'll learn about the challenges he faced with his first commercial investment property, which was a 12-unit historic apartment building, and how he overcame them. You'll learn what he loves about self-storage and why he feels the best opportunities are found in secondary and tertiary markets. You learn how he has utilized technology to automate 100% of his self-storage operations, along with his plans to scale this particular model. You learn how he feels the pandemic will impact the note investment space and what he and his team are doing to prepare for future opportunities, and much, much more. And so with that, guys, I'm excited to get onto the show with Brian. But before we do, just have a few quick housekeeping items. With the first one being something that you've heard me talk about now for many, many weeks, many months probably, is our third mobile home park investment fund. Guys, it's live. It went live a few weeks ago, and we're currently seeking investment partners to join us and our team to purchase mobile home parks across the country. As you know, this is what I've been doing now for the past decade. This is our core competency. This is what we do phenomenally well. If you're interested in the mobile home park investment space and you'd like to join a proven team with a proven track record, go to my website, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. Again, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. Click on the Get Started Today button, fill out that short form, and you'll be able to download our PPM and offering memorandum and learn more about this investment opportunity. Moving on here, guys, a program we launched a few months back called BringKevinADeal.com. This is where I will pay you upwards of $200,000 for any one mobile home park or parking lot deal that is referred to me that I end up buying. Okay, to learn more about this opportunity and to download my deal acquisition criteria guide and to also submit a deal to discuss, you can go to BringKevinADeal.com. Moving on, if you love what we're doing here at the Real Estate Investing for Cashflow Podcast, please subscribe to the show and be sure to leave a rating and review on iTunes. We attract awesome guests such as Brian to the show because of the reviews. And so we leave it up to you guys to give us your honest opinions and ratings on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else you might listen to this show. And I'd be eternally grateful to you if you could do that. And lastly, guys, I want to remind you of the free 30-minute phone call I offer each and every Friday where you can jump on the horn with me for 30 minutes to discuss anything and everything about real estate investing. No ulterior motives here. I've been doing this now for years, going on 6 years. And this is just a way for me to connect with you and for me to hopefully help you on your real estate investing journey. All I ask that you do is please put some specific notes when you're making the appointment about what you'd like to chat about, any specific questions you might have. That way we can spend our time most efficiently together. Again, go to kevinup.com to get signed up for that call with me. And now, guys, without further ado, let's get on to the part of the show that you've been waiting for, which is our interview with Brian Hamrick. So here we go. Alrighty, guys, it is my honor to introduce my guest for today's show, founder of Hamrick Investment Group, Brian Hamrick. Brian, how you doing today, buddy?
Hey, great, Kevin. I'm excited to be on your show.
Yeah, excited to see you again. It's only been maybe a month or two since I was on your show, the second time I was on your show. And so we've spent a good bit of time together here over the last year or so, just talking real estate. And so excited now to have you on my platform and kind of dig into your background. You've done enough digging in my background, so now I get to dig into yours. So, Brian, for those folks that aren't familiar with you, that don't know who you are and what it is you do, maybe take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and ultimately how you landed in real estate.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So my name's Brian Hamrick. Hamrick Investment Group is my company. I got my background in movie marketing. So I spent 20 years making movie trailers. And I apply the lessons I learned from that every day to what I do in real estate now. I've completely transitioned from a W-2 job to full-time real estate. And in the past 10 years, ever since the Great Recession, I've been building my portfolio, starting with multifamily here in Grand Rapids, where I own all of my residential, to the point where I started syndicating. Currently, we have 370 doors here in Grand Rapids in Wyoming, Michigan. And I've also expanded into self-storage with a different partner and performing and non-performing notes. So I love investing in real estate and I love talking about it.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate that. And I did not know that was your background. And so I would love to know what, if you had to pick one or two top skill sets that you learned producing movie trailers that carried over into the real estate space, what were they?
Well, so when you're making a movie trailer, you get what is not the completed film. So you actually get footage from the movie. It could be cut into like a 3 or 4 hour version of the film because they're still working on the film. And when you're making a trailer, you basically have to cut that down to 2.5 minutes of the best, most impressive material. And you can add in sound effects, music, narration, anything that makes it understandable and clear. But no matter how you approach it, you're always starting with a blank slate. You know, you have the movie, and in real estate, you have the deal that you want to do, but you got to figure out, how am I going to approach it? What's my vision? What's my overall vision that I'm going to bring to this deal? Who am I going to, not just what sound effects or music, but what partners and team members am I going to bring into this deal? And how are we going to go about it? How are we going to tell the story in a way that is convincing enough that I can bring investors in, or I can get people to buy a movie ticket to see it in the theater, or get lenders on board to put up money to do this investment, or get butts in seats. That's it's very similar. You're starting with a blank slate and you're putting the pieces together as you go along.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just for my own internal knowledge, how long does it typically take to put together a movie trailer?
It can take anywhere. When I was doing it, and I've been out of the business for at least 6 years now, but when I was doing it, you could spend a year on a trailer. In fact, I spent a year working on one trailer, and it never saw the light of day.
Oh, wow.
Because there's always competition. We're always up against other companies that are cutting trailers for the same movie.
Got it.
Just like in real estate, there's always competition for that deal that you're trying to get.
Do you have one big claim to fame?
Well, right behind me, you can see the trailer for Remember the Titans.
Oh, wow.
And I was
good flip.
I was one of the editors on that trailer, worked closely with Disney Studios and my producer on that, and love the movie, love the trailer. That was one of my best experiences. 8 Mile is a campaign I worked on too with Eminem. That was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And so let's talk about the introduction to real estate, right? You worked your W-2 job for 20 years. At some point along the way, either you made the determination that you wanted a change in your life, you need the plan for future retirement, whatever the reason was, you ultimately fell into real estate. And so when did that happen? And how long did it take you before you fully transitioned out of your W-2 job as into a full-time real estate investor?
Well, it was a process, and it started with me realizing that at the time I was single. I was making a lot of money, living in an apartment. I've always kept my spending low. I'm not one of those people to go buy the latest and most expensive thing. So I had all this money that was sitting in a bank account, and I realized I don't know what to do with this. I don't know the first thing. I didn't even know what a mutual fund was at the time. And I was 30 years old. So I just started learning and investigating. And that's what led me to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which actually I never read the book. I listened to Rich Dad's Secret, which was a Nightingale Conant tape series that Robert Kiyosaki did, if you remember Nightingale Conant.
Yep.
And that really opened my eyes to real estate investing. So the first thing I did was in Los Angeles, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and they have this thing called the Learning Annex. And I went and saw Robert Allen at the Learning Annex. And you know who he is.
No money down.
Yeah, no money down. And he had this great wealth academy that I think was only $5,000, but it was probably the most impressive motivational presentation I'd ever seen, because I was the first to the back of the room waving my hand to buy this Robert Allen education program. And the next week I quit my job and And then a month later, I realized I shouldn't have quit my job. So I went back to my job. Luckily, it wasn't too hard to get my job back. Cutting movie trailers. And from there, I just started buying single family. I joined a network that was buying out of state because it was too expensive to buy real estate in California at the time, and buying single family across the country in good areas with good jobs. And then realized that didn't really work very well for me. I don't think I really made much money. And I realized that was kind of the slow growth way. Started looking into buying multifamily and apartments. And then once the bubble burst and once we had moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, that's when I took off in 2008, bought my first 12 unit and haven't looked back since.
That was really good timing. You timed the market well.
Well, I always say that I could see that bubble. You could physically see that bubble forming living in Los Angeles, because you could see all the overdevelopment. And I just saw an article yesterday about people waiting in line in, I don't know if it's Oxnard or Oxford, California, waiting in line for a new residential development that was in the suburbs, like outside of Los Angeles. And those are the same things that were happening back in 2006, 2007. People waiting in line for days to buy, to pay $600,000, $700,000 for a single family home way outside of LA. And we're seeing that again today.
Do you not think there's a different reason for that today? That example that you've given us, an hour outside of Los Angeles. I'm of the mind that a lot of folks are kind of migrating away now from those densely populated urban centers, at least temporarily, especially in the more, the states that have had the more egregious lockdown. LA being one of them, New York City, you've got Boston, you've got Chicago, all the major MSAs. And it seems as though those folks that had been cooped up for a very long period of time surely don't want to go through that again, and so they're opting to find maybe it could be a secondary residence, it could just be primary now, being that maybe they can work remotely, right? You don't think that's more of the catalyst of folks lining up for these types of subdivisions?
I do think that has a lot to do with it, but I also think that they're buying into an unaffordable situation, because we know that demographically more people are leaving California than are moving to California. We know that the taxes are getting so high that it's driving business away. What happens when those jobs start to disappear and they can't afford that the mortgage on a $600,000-$700,000 starter home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's crazy to even say that, a $600,000 or $700,000 starter home. That's for you living in Michigan and me living in Florida, that's quite a large number.
We would be living pretty good in Michigan or Florida, but in California, you're getting what's essentially a starter home.
So I know that you've invested in multifamily, self-storage. I think you had mentioned office as well, and then also notes, both performing and non-performing. And if you had to choose out of all those that you've spent time in and that you've dabbled in or currently own today, what would you say your favorite is? If you can only choose one of them, what would be the one favorite that you would roll with?
By far, self-storage.
And why?
It's similar to your reason for going into parking lots. You don't have tenants, you don't have residents. Utility-wise, in self-storage, all you have is electricity to keep the lights on at night and the security gate operational. You don't have gas, plumbing. Those are things go in multifamily. Our biggest expense outside of property tax and insurance and the mortgage is plumbing and water. Because I'm in Grand Rapids, most of my properties are older, so that's why plumbing is such a big expense. And we don't have that in self-storage. The expense ratio is around 35%, and your management with this facility that we acquired, our management is completely virtual. We don't have anyone on site, and we have an automated payment system, and it runs smoothly. We're essentially. Typically, we are essentially fully occupied, although we just added 15,000 more square foot. So we're building back up again as far as occupancy. But I just love self-storage because it's so much easier.
Let's talk about that for a second. That's an interesting concept. And, I looked at self-storage as a potential investment, meaning an active investment back prior to the last crash. In fact, we even bought some raw land and we're going to develop a few facilities. And then 2008 happened and that obviously went by the sidelines. And so I am passively invested with a few groups today in self-storage. So I believe in the asset class. I like it. However, we are not actively involved in that space. But I do remember this is back probably 2006 era, before things crashed, going to a few of the national conventions. I forget the largest self-storage association, whatever their national convention that they do in Vegas. They probably do it other places as well. But I remember going there and, the automation discussion was fairly new. There were a few companies in the space. There were like the few oddball operators throughout the country that might have had a facility here or there that had successfully automated the process. But I'm guessing nowadays it's more common. It's still not the common model, but it's probably more common than what it was, 12 years ago. And so talk to us about how that works. Because I know that one of the major ancillary income streams is the retail component as well, right? You've got boxes, you got tape, you got box cutters and all this other stuff that a person typically has to be there to sell. In addition, you've got U-Haul rentals and things of that nature. So do you forego those other ancillary income streams because of the automation component?
In our case, yes. So, and I can only speak to our particular property, of which we only have one at the moment, but it was such a great deal, such a great find that I'll tell you kind of how we've approached it based on your questions there. Mm-hmm. So my partner, Tim, he's the one who found it, and it was a true mom and pop owned facility. It was about 28,000 square foot with a 3,000 square foot office space and a pole barn. And we paid what at that point was a fair price based on the income that was coming in, the net operating income. And we quickly, right away, realized, okay, the way they were doing it and the way that we were going to do it were completely different, because every month they were mailing out 185 postcards or invoices, mm-hmm. 185 stamps to all of their customers so that they would get paid. We immediately switched over to management software and put up a website using StoredGe. StoredGe storage. That's the system we use. And what they provide is the website infrastructure and the payment infrastructure. So not only can people pay online, but at 2 a.m, they can go online, see if we have any storage facility or storage units open and available, rent that facility, get a code, drive there at 2:30 a.m, type that code into the keypad at the gate, and go right into their locker. Mm-hmm. So automating it that way really just made things so much easier, streamlined everything, and now we don't need to have anyone on site except for maybe a couple times a week to make sure it's clean and sweep out any mm-hmm. units. Now you bring up ancillary income like U-Haul and whatnot. Our facility is not big enough, in our opinion, to warrant having U-Haul on site. And also the cost, there's a cost to having that ancillary income when you're selling boxes, renting out U-Hauls. And that is, you have to have an employee on site, or at least, pay a certain amount. You also have to, there's also some other costs too, to have that arrangement. And in our estimation, at our size, we just don't warrant that. So we have mm-hmm. stayed completely virtual. We tore down the office building and the pole barn, and we've added 15,000 more square foot. So now we have 40,000 or 43,000 square foot, and we widened our gate, and again, it's fully automated, and we're at 85% occupancy now after having just opened up that 15,000 square foot about 6 months ago.
Okay, fantastic. That's awesome. And so other than just having to have someone, so you do have somebody has to go sweep out a unit or just put their eye on that property every once in a while. But other than that,
a couple of times a week.
Yeah. So is that in your opinion, is that a scalable model? Like, are you guys looking to replicate that exact model in other facilities?
We are. And before coronavirus, we were looking at doing ground up construction, finding areas around Michigan or even outside of Michigan where you could do a demographic study, a feasibility study, and see, okay, how much square footage is needed in this area. And our business model leading up to coronavirus was, okay, let's get some of that land under contract and start building, start supplying that needed square footage of storage in secondary and tertiary markets, because right now a lot of the primary markets are just overbuilt. And when you hear about overbuilding and oversupply, typically it's in the primary markets that's happening. That was pre-coronavirus. We've kind of put that on hold because we try to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry, and the smart money in self-storage is just, they're not building right now. They're keeping their powder dry because a lot of these new facilities that are coming online in the primary markets are going to be struggling to lease up. And the smart money, the bigger players in the field, from what we understand, are just kind of waiting to be able to come in and buy those distressed properties.
You think they'll struggle to lease up due to the pandemic that we're in and folks maybe being out of work or what have you? Or is it just due to the sheer being overbuilt?
I think because if they're in primary markets or areas that have been overbuilt, they are going to struggle.
Okay.
Because there's an oversupply.
So not necessarily anything to do with the pandemic, just kind of a perfect storm, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. Confluence of different events.
Yeah. Got it. Good deal. So let's talk about the very first deal. It's really the foundation, right? I think you'd mentioned it was a 12-unit apartment complex there in the Grand Rapids area, 2008. That kind of always sets the stage as to the events that follow as far as investments and things of that nature. Either it goes really good or it goes really bad, and maybe you change direction or change gears, but it probably went pretty well because it sounds like you went ahead and bought many other multifamily apartments thereafter. And so, but let's talk about the first one, how you found it. Why were you excited about it? Was it a value add? Was it a stabilized property? Just give us some of the higher level details if you could.
Yeah, so it was a value add. It's a historic property here in Grand Rapids. It's in an area called Heritage Hill. And it was built in 1870 by a Civil War veteran.
Wow.
12 units. You would think a lot of these older properties are houses that were converted into apartments. So they're really kind of weird configurations. Mm-hmm. This one, I think, was a house, but at some point someone must have gutted it, like maybe in the 20s, and built it into real apartments. So the apartments are well laid out, spacious, hardwood floors, a lot of character. But this was 2008. I was waiting. Like I said, I waited for that bubble to burst. And it was really a buyer's market. This property had been on the market for quite a while. It was at $300,000. I think we paid $385,000 for it, $385,000 for 12 doors, which today it would be 2 to 3 times that much. The challenge was the way it had been managed was it just kind of, let's get anyone who can pay $100 security deposit and sign the lease. Let's get them in the door. And that you could tell that from just doing the due diligence. I would see some of the expenses were having to replace a door that the police broke down when they were entering the unit because of a domestic disturbance.
Oh, gosh.
There was an expense for cleaning up broken glass and the blood on the floor, things like that. When we bought the property, there was carpet in the bathrooms.
Ooh, that's always a nice touch.
And not nice carpet, like the thin, like just industrial carpet, really kind of nasty. So the first thing we did was actually the first pivotal decision I made was not to manage it myself. I hired a professional third-party property management company and let them do all the heavy lifting, which involved getting rid of tenants who didn't want to pay rent or were causing problems, going into each unit and doing some rehab, which would basically be, let's rip up the carpet in the bathroom, put in tile floors. Let's put a nice countertop and backsplash in the kitchen, refinish the hardwood floors, which are beautiful. Mm-hmm. And of course, paint and, some interior hallway cosmetic stuff, paint and adding laundry machines, coin-operated washer and dryers that we owned and we collect the money from. So it was a great experience. I kind of budgeted way low as far as what we were going to have to put into it the first year. I budgeted $40,000. It ended up being $90,000. So it was a good learning experience, but it's definitely paid off over the years. And we still own it today.
Okay, got it. Fantastic. Well, that's exciting. So most of the properties that you own then are there in the Grand Rapids or immediate surrounding areas, correct?
Correct. I could drive to any of my properties in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Any of my residential properties.
Got it. So I want to pivot here a little bit if we could. And again, we mentioned that you've done a lot of work in the, not just multifamily, but office, self-storage, and then also the note space. And this is, the question is more going to be related to the pandemic. And, times are just really crazy at present. And just to give folks a sense of context here, we're recording this on September 1st. And so, if you hear it, a few weeks thereafter, you'll know when we actually recorded it. But I'm guessing that times are still going to be a little crazy and a little awkward and weird when this actually comes out. And so, the entire world it's in a tailspin. It's just weird times that we find ourselves in. Unemployment is in double digits. I haven't looked at where unemployment is, but I know it's in double digits. If they say it's not, it definitely still is. And as of August 25th, and so a week ago, there were nearly 4 million homeowners that were in some type of mortgage forbearance program. And I was shocked to read that represented just shy of 8% of all mortgages in the country, which is a fairly large number. And so my question for you would be, and this really pertains to the note space, do you think that, will foreclosures and non-performing notes skyrocket as a result of this pandemic?
I believe they will, but I don't think we're going to see that for 12 to 18 months. Mm-hmm. I think that the government is going to keep trying to do what they can to inject liquidity and the ability for people to pay. But at some point, we're going to have to come to a reckoning. I don't know how bad that's going to be, but and I also don't think it's going to happen next month. I think it's going to take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to really see that play out.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if we can agree that there will be some blood in the streets, is there anything that you and your team are doing today to kind of prepare for that?
Yeah, well, we're raising money, keeping our some of our powder dry, really looking at assets that we could acquire now through that filter of what's it going to be like in 6 to 12 mm-hmm. to 18 months? If we buy these performing notes now or non-performing notes now at this price, are they even going to be worth that in 12 months? Yeah. So we really have to use that filter and not be overly optimistic in the deals that we're looking at right now, and really think, okay, when that reckoning happens, are we going to still be okay? And I do want to say, we are buying performing and non-performing notes. These are not FHA type mortgages. These are contract for deeds, land contracts. Mm-hmm. So we have ultimate flexibility in working with our borrowers to help keep them in their home. If they have problems, our hands are not tied like a lot of FHA type lenders are as to how we can construct something that's going to work for everybody.
Gotcha. And where are you finding these notes? Are these coming from banks, lending institutions? Where do you normally find these things?
We work with note brokers. So okay. There are brokers out there who work with funds like ours and other institutions to bring out contract for deeds, land contracts. That's where we're getting most of our product.
And are you only buying those in Michigan as well?
No, we're all over the country. So there are states that we try to avoid. New York, Illinois.
Yeah. I got a sweet spot for New York now. Well, no offense to those folks in New York that are listening, but we own some property there. But it's a tough state to do business, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's a tough state to do business, and they have laws that are kind of adverse to note investors. My partner Gene, he handles all that for me, but he definitely has an algorithm in his head on what states do we want to avoid, what municipalities do we want to stay away from, and which states do we like investing in.
Got it. So how about let's switch gears a little bit here as far as the preparing for what might be the fallout. So let's switch over to commercial real estate. what asset classes do you believe will not, will thrive, not necessarily even just thrive, but just will do really well moving through this pandemic, which ultimately I think will convert into a downturn. But then also, of the ones that might not do so well, are those also in your radar to potentially consider? For example, I personally think office. I think office, time will tell, but and I don't have a crystal ball, but office isn't really feeling the pain today because most office leases are longer term leases, 3-5 years, sometimes 7 or even 10-year leases. And if there's corporations or companies that are going to restructure, maybe not utilize the same amount of space, they're not going to be able to really, to do that reconfiguration until their lease renewal date comes. And so I think there's going to be some type of delayed reaction in the office space. But given that you're in the office space, do you think that is an asset class that maybe you guys will that you will focus on, given that there could be some distress there?
Yeah, I think on a case-by-case business, case-by-case perspective, yes, absolutely. Office scares me a little bit, because I'm not that experienced in office. but I'll tell you what scares me is that yes, you might have a tenant in there who has signed a long-term lease, but if coronavirus and the after effects of coronavirus force it to lay off all of its employees, well, it no longer can afford that space or needs that space. And are you really going to spend the next couple of years in court chasing after the money that they committed to in the lease? So it scares me from the perspective of what's going to happen to the tenants that are in place. And it scares me from the perspective of a lot of times when you buy office, if it's vacant, it can take a long time to find the right tenant for that space. And that's, the months, the years that go by while that space is vacant, it's unactivated. You're not making money off of it. Whereas residential, if you buy an apartment building that's 50% occupied, if you go in there with the right management team who knows what they're doing, you can get that leased up in 6 months. Office, it takes a lot longer, and you really need the right broker team to help you fill that space.
Yeah. What is your current, investment office today? I mean, do you have multiple properties, or is it just one?
I invested somewhat passively in an office building here in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
I'm a little more active than just a passive investor, but I've kind of been there at the table as we make decisions. We were thinking of expanding at one point before coronavirus, then we pulled back. It's about to be 100% leased up, so we're very happy about that. But I've seen how it's taken 3 years to get to a point where we're leased up.
Yeah, that's great. You said about to be 100%. That means that there's actually someone new coming in, a tenant coming in, even during these crazy times. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, we hope. Fingers crossed. Yeah, our tenants who were in place before coronavirus are fine. They're not affected like a lot of the other businesses are. It's a 15,000 square foot office building. It's right along the Grand River in Grand Rapids. If anyone knows Grand Rapids, they know where the Grand River is. So it's a great location. 15,000 square foot. We have about 2,000 square foot available, and we're pretty sure we've got someone who's going to take that.
That's great. Fantastic.
The other thing about office that I'll say is that when you do bring a new tenant in, you have what's called TI, tenant improvement, and it's a certain amount per square foot. So you have to have a good cushion in reserves to afford to pay for that TI to build out the space for your incoming tenant.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the areas where you see a lot of defaults in like the office and the retail space. It's just not the ownership, not necessarily not being able to afford the property, but not being able to actually afford to get new tenants. I've seen many different assets, prime located assets. In fact, there was one recently that I talked to the new owner of. It's in Tampa. I forgot how large the building is, but it's in 60 to 80,000 square foot office, prime location, and essentially the old ownership structure. They'd owned it for 15 or 20 years, and they just mismanaged it to where they didn't have enough money to put back into the building to get it to the standards for what tenants wanted nowadays. And so when they picked it up, it was 40% vacant. which is unheard of in that particular marketplace. So I think that happens quite often. And I think it's one of the risky aspects of those two asset classes.
Absolutely. And the same goes for retail too. It's the difference between tired money, the people who have owned this property for a long time and may not want to put more money into it to bring it up to standards. So you have the tired money, but then you have the fresh money. Whereas if you sell that asset, the new buyer is going to bring fresh money into the deal and bring it up to the standards where it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, everyone in real estate, everyone talks about all the, the good deals they've done. They share their checks. Well, what they're taking to the bank is as far as how much they've made on a refinance or a sale, what have you. But obviously, with all the good comes the bad, right? There is a dark side, right? Not all deals are easy. There's lots of headaches and struggles that all of us have gone through to get to where we're at today. And so, if you could, Brian, I'd love if you would share maybe the worst deal or a deal that didn't go as planned. Maybe share that with us and what ultimately happened and how you got through it.
So when I was still living in Los Angeles and investing out of state, I got to the point where I was just buying a couple properties sight unseen because properties were so cheap in other parts of the country compared to the cost of living in California that it was like buying candy in a candy store. And one of the properties I bought was just a condo in an old converted retirement home. It had been a retirement home. They converted it to a condo in Greensboro, South Carolina. And it was $30,000 to buy this one bedroom condo that was furnished. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? And on paper, it would cash flow a couple $100s a month. And pretty quickly, it became apparent the developer had not followed through on a lot of its promises. The pool that was supposed to be activated, the retail that was supposed to be activated in the building never got activated. The management team was not carefully considering who they let into the property. And before we knew it, there was prostitution, drugs being sold. I got a charge on one of my statements for replacing carpet in the hallway, which was a shared hallway. And I said, well, why am I paying for that? And they said, well, because someone lit the carpet on fire outside your tenant's door.
Oh my gosh.
So I knew, okay, this property has gone downhill and gone downhill pretty fast. And I did I was on a podcast a year ago and I kind of did some research to talk about it in more detail. And I found a bulletin board or Facebook page or something where one of the tenants had complained because the property manager had been having sex with one of the tenants, one of the prostitute tenants in public and selling them drugs. And this was the property manager.
Oh my gosh.
And at one point they had a community meeting where the prostitute came barging into the meeting and yelling at them saying, you can't get rid of me because I'm sleeping with the property manager. And then she threw a brick through a window.
Wow.
So
that's a good one. That's a good story. Yeah. And so the final question is, did you make or did you lose money on that deal?
So I told you I spent $30,000 to buy it cash and I sold it. I was lucky to sell it for $2,000.
Really?
Yeah. Because there are always buyers out there who will buy the worst of the worst. And they paid me $2,000 to just wipe my hands clean of it.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay. 2000. So you lost 28. Okay. That's a big one. That's a kick in the stomach.
That was a good lesson. Don't just trust, there are all these networks out there selling you.
What attracted
dreams.
you to that deal? I mean, did you just happen to stumble across it on like Zillow or something like that? Or was it someone pitching it on Bigger Pockets? Or, I mean, that was when you were living in LA, correct?
This was way before Bigger Pockets, even before Zillow. I was involved in a network that was centered in Los Angeles that had connections with realtors, brokers, insurance agents, property management teams all across the country in really good cities. And at that point, I had bought 6 other properties through this network. And this was the 7th and last one that I bought. And I found a formula that I liked. I plugged into that formula and just kind of closed my eyes and started investing blindly. And some of the properties I did go visit before I bought, but there were at least 3 of them where I bought them sight unseen.
Yeah, very interesting. You say prior retirement home and prostitute; those two things just don't go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's it was a scary property.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that, and I'd like to move on to the lightning round, if we could, Brian. This is where I'm going to ask you 6 short questions, looking for 6 short answers, and this is a way for us and the listeners to get a little bit more intimate with you. The first one here is your biggest fear. What is it?
Losing money for my investors.
All righty. Second one biggest regret.
Biggest regret is I didn't buy more between 2008 and 2012. There were a lot of deals I passed up that had I bought them, I'd be sitting pretty.
Yeah, I don't think I have any regrets, but if I did, that would be one of them. Most influential business book.
Influential business book?
Yes.
The one that comes to mind is Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. I just finished reading that last month, and there's so much good information in there.
That's a great book. Outside the daily work, Ryan, what do you do to decompress?
This is okay. You wanted quick answers, but this will be a little bit longer. So I host a podcast, and yesterday I just interviewed someone. It's the rental property owner and real estate investor podcast. And every Halloween, I like to do like a Halloween episode. So I just interviewed someone he's a reverend who like hunts ghosts. He's not, he wouldn't appreciate being called a ghost hunter, but he's someone who like goes to haunted homes, helps the homeowner understand that. I love like learning about the supernatural and watching movies, shows like that about.
I didn't know that was real. I thought that was just reality, like TV shows. I didn't realize that there was real people out there like that. So,
yeah, it's going to be my Halloween episode.
Okay. Very, very cool. How about the one thing that you can't live without?
One thing I can't live without would my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about yeah, that's a good one, especially if she's going to listen to this.
Yeah, she will. She's standing right next.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So what would your backup plan be? One day you just woke up and decided that you no longer wanted to be in real estate anymore. Where would you devote your time, energy, and focus?
Would I have to be making money?
No, it's whatever you'd want to spend your time on. I mean, if you didn't need to make money, right? If your assets are still paying you, you need to make money, right? It's completely up to you. This is an open-ended question.
Yeah, I always thought, one of the things I'd like to do is just give back to my community more. I mean, I try to do that now, but I think that there are some underserved neighborhoods in my community, neighborhoods that I started investing in when I moved to Grand Rapids, that I'd like to figure out, okay, how can I help those neighborhoods and those people, and more from a business perspective and a maybe micro lending perspective. That's what I would like.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. And moving on here to the final segment of the show is what we call the golden nugget segment. And, you shared a lot of great information today here, Brian. Really appreciate all that. But if you had just one last golden nugget stuck in your pocket somewhere, of advice or wisdom that you could share with our listeners that might inspire and motivate them as they progress in their very own real estate investing career, what would that one last golden nugget be?
I think that if you're starting out or you're trying to progress and get to that next level, you need to put yourself in an uncomfortable position. You need to do something that makes you uncomfortable. And I think one of the things I would recommend is that people learn how to talk about what they're doing. You and I talk about all the time on podcasts about what we're doing, what other people are doing. But there are people who listen to podcasts but don't know how to put it into words. I would say put together a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, and deliver it at your local real estate investor club. Or, speak about it. Just do it, go out and speak to people, put yourselves in that uncomfortable place where you have to speak about it. And that helps you build authenticity, credibility, and experience.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know that a lot of real estate investing clubs aren't meeting right now, but they've got platforms even like, Facebook Live, right? Everyone's on Facebook. And so get yourself out of your comfort zone and do a Facebook Live, right? Put some planning into it. It doesn't have to be a beautiful PowerPoint presentation, but put some planning behind it, put some thought behind it, and tell your world, your Facebook world, what it is you do. And even if it's a 5-minute presentation, put together something for Facebook Live, for Zoom, put it out to your contacts so they can get a better sense of what you're doing. Yeah, that's awesome, Brian. This has been a lot of fun, my friend. For those folks that are listening that want to learn more about you and what you're doing, what's the best place to reach you or find out more?
2 places. One is listen to my podcast, the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. Kevin, you've been on there twice, and Those are both great episodes. I wish I could remember the number. The other place is my website. It's higinvestor.com, higinvestor.com. And you can email me at Brian, Brian, at higinvestor.com.
Good deal. Brian, it's been a lot of fun, my friend. I'm glad we finally had the opportunity to get you on here. So it's been a lot of fun and good learning about your past too. Again, the whole movie trailer thing, I had no idea. And I love the movie, man. Remember the Titans. That's probably one of my favorites. And it's phenomenal. I just saw it like a couple months ago.
I just watched it again last month.
It's one of those that kind of actually come across TV quite often. I don't watch regular TV all that often. I might be scanning on a Saturday afternoon with the kids or something like that, but you'll find it on some of the different random channels on cable as well. So it's a good one. It's classic.
It's the perfect movie because every scene has some sort of conflict in it. Every single scene is conflict between one or two or a group of characters.
Yep.
And it just builds and builds and builds.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Well, Brian, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I'm wishing you all the best with you and your family as we go through these crazy times, and wishing you the best as well with your investing career. So keep it up, my friend. Thanks, Kevin. It's been such a great time talking with you on your show. Alrighty, guys. Well, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Buff, wishing you huge success. Take care.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.